No checklist completed is going to save you. No bucket list is going to save you. No amount of blood, sweat, and tears that you've poured out in your life is going to save you. No amount of cash or worldly possessions is going to save you. You can't take it with you. You'll be dead. Buddha can't save you. Gandhi can't enlighten you. The Pope can't absolve your sins. The saints can't pray you into eternal life. Muhammad can't fix you. Allah isn't able. No president, no legislation, no Supreme Court justice, no state or nation or leader or celebrity. No one can save you because there is salvation in no one else.
That's right. Nobody but Jesus. There's salvation in no one but Jesus, and that is maybe the most important bit of information for anyone, anywhere. So today, I'll acknowledge it's been a long time. Today, there's something that I heard yesterday on, I actually don't even remember which podcast I was listening to, but something that I heard yesterday was about this. I think it was The Briefing, Al Mohler's The Briefing podcast, which is a pretty decent podcast if you don't listen to it. It's helpful regarding lots of things in our culture like abortion and different stuff like that. But he talked about the CDC report that has come out, and there are multiple places talking about it. It's kind of a big deal. It's a big bit of news. This CDC report, I've got it up right here on the CDC website, and it talks about the major increase in sadness among teen girls, and especially among LGBTQ youth. And the reason that they didn't include transgender in that is simply because the study didn't speak specifically into that bit of it. But there's an increasing in sadness and exposure to violence among teen girls and LGBTQ plus youth. This is the title of the CDC article, the report. So I want you to, I'm going to read just very briefly a little bit here, and then I want you to hear what is being said here, and maybe do some judging yourself. I'm going to talk about a few things that are going on, and then talk about some scripture and how the Christian ought to think about this kind of epidemic, this kind of thing that's going on. So it says this: young people in the U.S. are collectively experiencing a level of distress that calls for action. This report focused on a select set of YRBS questions. I don't know what that stands for. I haven't researched this for hours or anything. I'm assuming that is either the company or the title of the study or something like that, but a select set of YRBS questions that represent leading indicators of health and well-being for young people, and that share common set of factors that can be enabled through schools to protect young people from these threats. Okay, even in that first paragraph, there's something that, oh my goodness, Siri, you're killing me in the face. Even in that first paragraph, there's some things that we, as Christians, need to hear. It says that young people are collectively experiencing a level of distress that calls for action. Now that is true, and of course we all should be moved to action in this kind of area when something like this is going on, when something like this is a trend. It should move us to action, and especially as Christians, we should be moved and broken even over this. this news. Now, it's actually not news. This is really just the first time it's been documented, but it's not rocket science to be able to look into the schools and look at the young people in our world today and see the chaos and see the struggle and see the identity crisis and those kinds of things. Well, let's move to the second paragraph. Notice what they immediately go to as the solution at the end of the first paragraph. That common set of factors that can be enabled through schools to protect young people from these threats. So then they continue on in the second paragraph. While the primary goal of schools is academic learning, they also play a critical role in shaping mental, physical, and social growth. That is something that every parent should take into account right there. More than 95% of children and adolescents in the U.S. spend much of their daily lives in school, providing a considerable opportunity to foster the knowledge, skills, and support needed to help prevent and reduce the negative impact of violence and other trauma and improve mental health. The CDC has identified and supports a range of evidence-based activities that can make a profound difference in the lives of teens with a relatively small infusion of support to our schools. So that is a whole big jumble of words there that has been puked up. But essentially, what they're saying is that this is a major problem, and we should look to the school. The first thing that they come up with that we're going to need to be moved to action, and the action that makes the most sense is the schools. We need to be moved into action among the schools because that's where kids spend most of their time during the day. That's where they get socially conditioned or learn social skills. That's where they get dipped into the culture around them and not simply in their parents' home. And so there's a lot that goes on there. That the phrase that schools play a critical role in shaping mental, physical, and social growth is hefty. It's not something to be ignored. So it says later down, the CDC's evidence-based What Works in Schools program has demonstrated impact on key health behaviors and experiences that affect the nation's youth. The program supports school districts across the country in making school environments safer and more supportive, with a strong focus on improving school connectedness, connecting young people and their families to needed services, and implementing quality health education. Participating schools have seen improvements in a wide range of health behaviors, including sexual behaviors, substance use, and sexual violence. So a couple of bullet points that they put in here that are actions that can be taken according to the CDC. And increasing the sense among all students that they are cared for, supported, and belong at school. So the idea of belonging, it's no secret that young people, specifically as they get a little bit older, that belonging becomes a major thing. We all look for friends, we look for acceptance, we look for love and being cared for. We all look for those kinds of things. In fact, I mean, back in the day, as I can remember, I know that it's no different now, and it was no different before I existed. But back in the day, one of the things that you dealt with, well, even as we think about people that join gangs and those kinds of things, right, in schools, or join a crew that is violent or bullies people a lot. The introduction into those kinds of groups is not chiefly because, you know what, I feel like I want to be a jerk today, or you know what, I've done lots of thinking about this, and I know what I want to be when I grow up, a jerk and a bully. No one does that, right? Right? They're looking for acceptance, a place to belong. That's certainly a need, right? Let's continue to read that paragraph. That was the bullet point. Then they explain a little bit more. It says the proven health benefits of this approach, called school connectedness, are well demonstrated and can last well beyond their teenage years. However, Youth who are racial and ethnic minorities experience racism, and who identify as LGBTQ often feel less connected at school. Effective programs include approaches like providing safe and trusted adults, such as mentors or trained teachers, and connecting teens to their peers and communities through clubs and community outreach. These programs help kids know they matter and are not alone. All of this sounds wonderful on the surface, right? Um, the second bullet point: increasing access to needed health services, uh, including mental health and substance use prevention services, whether provided on site or through connecting youth and families to community-based sources of care. The third bullet point: implementing quality health education. That is quality health education that is medically accurate, developmentally appropriate, culturally and LGBTQ plus inclusive, which goes against medically accurate and developmentally appropriate. And grounded in science can help prevent violence and reduce mental health challenges by equipping teens with essential knowledge and skills such as negotiating sexual consent, managing emotions, and recognizing and asking for the help they need. So the I hope you can hear, as a Christian, I hope that you can hear the numerous problems with this whole thing that's going on. It's drenched with the secular humanism, postmodern garbage culture in which we live, the godless culture in which we live. It's dripping of it. Like the youth who are racial and ethnic minorities experience racism, and who identify as LGBTQ plus often feel less connected at school. Those issues did not arise because people are hateful. Those issues arose because the culture in America right now has created all over again, has recreated a sense of the out of control racism. Okay, maybe that's not the best way to say it, but let me explain and understand what I mean by that. That there is racism. There always has been. And in fact, racism isn't a biblical way to say that. It's because there's one human race. No matter what anybody says, racism, different races, that's just a constructed thing. It's not even realistic or real. But that the same thing that they mean by racism is that we've historically meant rather by racism, it is something that exists, and it's an ethnic thing, or it can be clans think that the other clans are worth less than them, or not as good as them, those sorts of things. I mean, that kind of thing has existed. James writes about it very clearly, about partiality, in his epistle. Those kinds of things have existed for a long time. However, there has been a massive cultural thing that has started, and I've talked about it before on this podcast, and we've talked about it before, Michael and I, when we talked about CRT and some things like that on the Babbling Pastors podcast. But this idea that somehow there has been an incredible explosion of racism, and actually it's not even an explosion, it's been this bad all along, and there's racism in the heart of all people, and all of the phrases that are used: white privilege, white fragility, white rage, and so our culture has begun to talk about and lift up the idea that this problem is in the heart of every human, and that this issue is in the forefront of every human, that every human is racist, that all, like, they're intentionally sort of pitting all of us against one another. And what do you think that's going to do to young people? What do you think that's going to do to young people? When you teach that all white people are prejudice against African Americans or any other ethnicity, doesn't matter which one. But when you teach that Caucasian people are adverse to or think that they're better than other ethnicities, when that is something that's promulgated and pushed and forced into and on the culture, um, uh, then of course what you're going to have is young people in schools are going to begin to mimic that. That there are now going to be young people of certain races or certain ethnicities, better way to say it, who automatically believe, because that's what the culture is telling them, who automatically believe that all of these people over here are against them, hate them, think that they're worthless, all of those kinds of things. And so now this is what I'm trying to say. This is what I'm trying to say. This is a humanly manufactured problem. This is a humanly manufactured problem. And it has been manufactured and manifested over the course of the past decade or two. It would be one thing to attack proven incidents of racism. That is every Christian, conservative or not, every Christian everybody who claims the name of Christ would be on board with that. But it got crazy and difficult when every little thing became racism, and then the way that all of the things operate in all of our society is racist. And so of course we're going to be creating this in our young people. And that so those who identify as LGBTQ plus often feel less connected at school. Well, yeah, duh, uh, because that's unnatural, and we've got a whole side of society that is saying that all of that is okay and good, and you be you. Um, when we know as Christians, now that doesn't mean that they're less than or anything like that. We all struggle with sins. We all fail all the time, daily. We fail and all of that. But it is to say that we can't call what is sin not sin. We can't call something that isn't natural natural and expect the results to be wonderful. Because you know what's true of every human? Romans tells us this. Romans 1 tells us this. What's true of every human is that every human has a God-given conscience, enough to know better, enough to know that the God of the Bible does exist, that there is a God that exists, that he says in his word that that no man has an excuse, because the light of nature reveals things about him, reveals that he's there, reveals in particular things about his divinity and his eternal power. So there's enough light just from nature alone to condemn man. We all know that they know that it's not natural. And yet they're being told by all sorts of people that it is natural, that it's good, that you were born this way, and those kinds of things. And so of course that's going to happen. This is all stuff that is predictable. And the answer is not, first of all, the schools. The public school system is not the answer, hardly for anything anymore. I miss the good old days where it was just reading, writing, and arithmetic. It wasn't even that when I was in school. I wish that we would just get back to that, and that they would shut up about everything else in life. But so this is it. It is true that we need, if we're going to have a public school system, that it should have help available, and that should be easy to seek help and find help for those who are really struggling with depression and things like that. But you see how in this article the very basis of some of the thinking behind it assumes some very unbiblical and untrue things that have to be have to be looked at. Another thing that's in the news that's incredibly related, and I'll tie it all together here in just a little bit. Another thing that's in the news is this. There's a a bill that's been introduced into the national at Washington, into the Congress, Senate, that kind of thing. A bill that's been introduced that is all about um, protecting kids online. It's called. This is the fun name for it. The Clean Slate for Kids Online Act. It's kind of a cumbersome title, but um, would give. So it says the Clean Slate for Kids Online Act would give every American an enforceable legal right to demand that internet companies delete all personal information that was collected from or about the person when he or she was a child under age 13. Um, and so what this is targeting is that there's a huge amount of predator activity that is online. In fact, most predator activity is online. It's much easier there. You have a less chance of getting caught and all of those kinds of things. Um, and so they're honing in on that. They're recognizing, okay, this is a big problem, and they introduced this bill to fix it. Or to help with it, rather. Of course, you can't fix it, but to help with it, to help with some protection and those kinds of things. Um, and we're not going to get deep into the bill, other than to say that there have been similar things in the past. This is something that may or may not pass. Who knows? But because you don't ever know what tag-ons they put into bills like this, it could have other things that are crazy in it, and so. But there's the Children's Internet Protection Act, which was enacted in the year 2000 to address concerns about children's access to obscene or harmful content over the internet. So the children on the internet thing and protecting them and the need to protect them from certain things has been a thing for a while. 2000, that's 20 years ago, right? I mean, so this has been going on since early internet. And this is the point of what I want to get to. It's the parents' fault. No one, the school does not bear the responsibility for your children. The school doesn't bear the responsibility for your children. Parents who hear my heart on this. It's going to sound like I'm just being a jerk, but if you allow your children on TikTok, for instance, have a Facebook profile, get into Snapchat, and have all of these friends you don't know about, have their phone in their room, have unrestricted, unmonitored, listen, all of that stuff is stupid. It makes you a negligent parent. You assume that your kids are different, that it won't happen to your kids, that they're smarter than that, or that they're better than that, or what, I mean, whatever, right? Like, there are lots of things that we could tell ourselves, and that we probably do. I mean, we're humans, right? But understand that when you allow your like, no one here in the whole grand scheme of things, on one end, we think that the school is the issue, or the fix of it. The school is going to fix it. We can get a lot better at this if we just do all of these things in the school. The other end of it is the federal government enacting things that frankly shouldn't even be a problem anyway. You know, if parents did parenty things, that wouldn't be an issue in the first place. But we too often have this, like when people text and drive, right? And it's never going to happen to you. Like, oh, it can't happen to me. And every person who has ever been texting and driving and had a wreck and killed someone or died themselves or whatever, everybody who's ever done that thought it couldn't happen to them. And so we can't be people that think that way. We can't be. The culture is against Christianity. The culture spits in the face of Christ. A culture that says, "Let me introduce you to my Jesus," rather than here's Christ as he presents himself in the Bible, um, or my God wouldn't do this or that, or my God believes this, rather than let me introduce you to the God of the Bible. Um, it does not know the God of the Bible. A culture that introduces their own ideas about Jesus, the things that they might accept about him, and the things that they might reject about him, that is not a culture that has any clue who the God of the Bible is, any clue who Jesus is, any relationship with Jesus Christ of the Bible. And our culture is against us. If you do not recognize that yet, please roll over in your bed, stop snoozing your alarm clock, and wake up. It's time for Christian parents to assume the role that God has given them, because here's the thing, you are going to answer, you're going to answer for this. You are. You are going to be the chief person, the chief couple in front of God Almighty someday, having to give an account for these things, these decisions. And so I can't imagine even thinking that there would be a solid um, that there'd be a solid excuse given, right? Even in our own minds, a solid excuse given on the day of judgment when we stand before God and He says, "So, why did you allow your child to be on TikTok in their room all day?" It's like, look, if you allow your children to be on TikTok, uh, especially in a private setting on TikTok, and it turns out at some point that they believe that um, homosexuality is fine, that the Bible gets it wrong on this thing and that thing, that the things that they learn in church are, I mean, helpful maybe, but not true always. If that's the case, you asked for it. Um, and 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 so it's it really is time. It really is time. If you haven't woken up yet, if you're a dad and you're home all the time and you're not leading your family spiritually, you're not praying with them or reading scriptures with them or talking about God with them, doing family worship and those kinds of things, then you're failing. You're failing them, because there's no amount of sports, no amount of other band or choir or other extracurriculars, no amount of those kinds of team building, character building things are going to make up for being brought up without interference from the stinking culture, being brought up in a godly home with godly parents who really do care about their children, and aren't just parenting them because it's my duty, but are parenting them and loving them because they do love their children and because they realize it's a calling from God, and it's an excellent calling from God. We have young people who are obviously confused about their identity, and they're looking for anything that they can identify with. And so, of course, this movement takes off, this sexual promiscuity and homosexuality and sodomy and all of these other things. Of course, this is going to take off. Of course, they're going to take off and run with this, um, because they're not developed yet, and if they haven't been being developed in the scriptures, um, and if the chief thing that speaks into their life all the time is the school, is their friends, the secular school, I mean. um, Listen, this isn't anything against. We have a couple of some public school teachers in our church, and they do their best, and they look for opportunities. Um, but we all at this point kind of have to admit that the public school system is proving very clearly that it's part of the government. that all of the kind of woke sort of trash that comes from our culture and the government is also leading the schools. And sin is not called sin. In fact, it's being proclaimed and preached and ushered in. We have kids who are saying that they're cats and getting away with it. And that last bit of the phrase, that last bit of the sentence, is the part that is the most frustrating. Um, it, it it would make an incredibly more sense to have a child who's a cat, who says, "I'm a cat, meow," and you'll address me with cat language and those kinds of things. And there are kids in classrooms that get litter boxes now because of this whole thing. When the reality is that the first time a child did that or attempted to do that, what should have happened at the very beginning is the teacher should have said, "No, sit in your desk and knock it off. Let's do math." Um, that should have been the response, and it should be the response from all of us collectively now. Yeah, knock it off. We know that that's not real. Just quit. Let's talk about whatever. Um, you as a Christian parent, um, you as a Christian parent, bear the weight and responsibility of your children. Now, that does not mean that every Christian parent, you raise your child up in the way that they should go, and you truly do give it your all, and you lead in family devotions, and you do all of those kinds of things. They don't have a phone until they're 25. Whatever extreme thing I might want to say right there, right? Um, that doesn't obviously mean that your children are going to grow up into adults that love the Lord, that they're always going to grow up into and become adults um, that are obsessed with God, that truly do love God and love His Word. Of course, that's not gonna happen all the time. It's God who woos the heart. Our part is simply to ensure that I mean, at the end of the day, I hope that every Christian parent um, can say, I did what I could, and truly mean it. Truly mean it. I just want to read one quick thing about this to close it out, and it's something that I read every time we do a child dedication at church. And so if you come to our church and you're listening to this or watching it, then you're familiar. But um, it goes like this. Now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, that you might do them in the land where you are going over to possess it, so that you and your son and your grandson might fear the Lord your God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. O Israel, you should listen and be careful to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, just as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Then it shall come about when the Lord your God brings you into the land which he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you, great and splendid cities which you did not build, and houses full of all good things which you did not fill, and hewn cisterns which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and you eat and are satisfied. Then watch yourself, that you do not forget the Lord who brought you up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall fear only the Lord your God, and you shall worship him and swear by his name. How much, Christian, of your home life, how much of your home life reflects that kind of devotion and dedication? to the Lord, to his word? How much of it is spent watching television shows and sports and going to outings and doing things that have nothing to do with God, his word, his church, his scripture? Um, One of the things that Tom Askell says when we um, when we were at the founders conference this past year, one of the things that he often says actually is that as a Christian you should find a good biblical church and build your life around it. And that's the way that every Christian, that's just the way that it always used to be. People in centuries past would the life of God's people revolved around the church, the local church itself. And so I'm begging you, not just because I'm a pastor. Those of you who know me know that I would have said things like this before I had this job. Um, I'm begging you. I'm begging you. Even if it's not our church, that's fine. But find a godly church that is obsessed with the scriptures and build your whole life around that, not around sports schedules and all the other things. It's not wrong necessarily to be involved in sports, okay? But too often our entire lives revolve around that schedule. Our entire lives revolve around that thing, and we have nothing to do with the church other than going there on Sunday some. And that's not being faithful to what God has caused. That's not being faithful to what he has asked of all of us. So I want to hopefully, if you're not too mad about the things that I've said this morning, hopefully this is something that will encourage you to open your eyes if they've been closed. And if you're a young single person, this is the kind of thing that you have to pray about, set your mind on now. Um, if you well, that's another podcast. But any preparation that you do in your life as a young person who's single, or even as a you know midlife person who's single or whatever, these are still things that are true of you. That we are to be a people who our lives revolve around one another. That's the idea. Our lives revolve around one another and Christ and his gospel and the truth of the scriptures. And our schedules are built based on Christ and his gospel and the truth of the scriptures. And we are incredibly too individualistic and self-obsessed. And I promise the public school nor the government is going to fix the problem with our children today. We have to do that. Parents have to do that. So have a good day.